My wife smiled when the estate attorney called her the primary beneficiary. She even touched the pearls at her neck, like the room had finally admitted what she believed the world owed her. Then the attorney turned the page. Before any distribution, he said, we need to address the spousal protection clause. That was when Denise looked at me for the first time all morning. Not with love. Not with regret. With calculation. The kind of calculation that happens when someone realizes a door she already walked through is locked behind her. I was sitting at the far end of a conference table in a gray estate office in Lansing, Michigan, wearing the same navy jacket I kept in my truck for hospital client meetings. My hands were folded in front of me. My attorney, Graham Ellis, sat to my left with a yellow legal pad and the calm expression of a man who had spent 30 years watching people discover that documents do not care about confidence. Denise had arrived 20 minutes late with a leather purse, a silk scarf, and Paul Raines beside her. Paul was not her attorney. That mattered. He was a financial planner, a charity board friend, and the man who had spent the last year telling my wife that inheritance money could turn her into someone new. By the time the estate attorney read the clause, Paul had stopped leaning back in his chair. Denise had stopped smiling. And I finally understood what Walter Keene had done. He had not left me money. He had left me something more dangerous to Denise than revenge. He had left me a record. My name is Calvin Mercer. I was 54 years old when my wife tried to turn 27 years of marriage into a property transition. That was the phrase she used. Not divorce. Not separation. Not betrayal. Property transition. She made it sound like a warehouse being reorganized. That was Denise's gift. She could wrap any cruelty in language clean enough to set on a conference table. I own a small industrial refrigeration service company outside Grand Rapids. Mercer Refrigeration. We maintain cooling systems for hospitals, food distribution warehouses, biotech labs, and a few grocery chains with equipment old enough to qualify as historical artifacts if it ever stopped leaking. Most people do not think about refrigeration until it fails. A hospital pharmacy does not think about vaccine storage until the temperature climbs 2 degrees. A meat distributor does not think about compressor redundancy until one unit fails at 3 in the morning and $500,000 of product begins warming in the dark. A lab manager does not think about a stuck valve until the alarm screams and everyone starts asking who checked the pressure logs. The thing about cooling systems is that they rarely fail all at once. First a pressure reading shifts. Then a valve sticks. Then a tech ignores a noise because the room still feels cold. Then someone silences the alarm because it is inconvenient. My marriage failed the same way. Not in one explosion. In readings I did not want to interpret. In small alarms I kept explaining away. In the quiet arrogance of believing that because the house still felt normal, nothing critical had broken. Denise and I had 2 daughters. Anna was 26, finishing a nurse anesthesia program that kept her exhausted, brilliant, and permanently surrounded by flashcards. Sophie was 23, a third-grade teacher with a voice gentle enough to calm a classroom and sharp enough to cut through nonsense when she finally decided she was done with it. They were my life. That is not a line. That is a fact. Whatever else Denise and I had built, whatever was real or false in our marriage, Anna and Sophie were the parts one never regretted. Maybe that is why Denise used them first. The calendar invite came on a Thursday afternoon. I was at a hospital in Kalamazoo, standing beside a compressor rack that sounded like it was grinding coffee beans instead of maintaining critical storage. My lead technician, Owen, had one hand on the gauge manifold and the other on his phone, pulling up service history. Head pressure's bouncing, he said. Because somebody ignored the condenser cleaning schedule. He gave me a look. Client says they did it. Clients say lots of things. My phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. I expected a supplier, maybe dispatch. Instead, it was a calendar invite from Denise. Subject, property transition location, dining room time, 7 p.m. attachment, separation terms. PDF. I stared at it for so long. Owen said, "Boss?" I locked the phone. "Check the fan relay." I'll be back in a minute. Outside the mechanical room, I opened the attachment. It was not a legal filing. I knew that immediately. It had no court stamp, no case number, no attorney header, no formal language beyond what someone thinks legal documents sound like after reading enough internet templates. But it was organized. Very organized. Temporary relocation schedule. Marital residence sale cooperation. Estate-related non-interference. Agreement not to discuss estate or separation finances with adult children until further notice. No claim to assets derived from the Keene estate. My eyes stopped there. The Keene estate. Walter Keene was Denise's uncle. Her mother's older brother. A retired landlord, part-time crank, former hardware store owner, and the only person in Denise's family who never seemed impressed by her performances. Walter had died 3 weeks earlier after a long decline that Denise called emotionally impossible while somehow finding time to discuss appraised property values before his funeral program was printed. He had no children. Denise was his closest living niece. For months, she had been telling people Walter's estate was worth millions. Not 1 million. Millions. The number changed depending on the audience. 3.2. 4. Almost 5 if the rental properties were valued correctly. She had said it at dinner. She had said it to her sister. She had said it to Anna in a voice that made tuition sound like a ribbon she would cut when she felt generous. I did not think much of it at first. Estate numbers are usually fantasy until attorneys and taxes get involved. But Denise had begun changing before Walter died. Or maybe she had stopped hiding. There is a difference. She bought new clothes and called them investment pieces. She started taking calls in the garage. She joined a foundation committee where Paul Raines handled legacy giving strategies. She began saying, when the estate settles, the way other people say, when the weather clears. And then came the invite. Property transition. I closed the attachment and stood in a hospital hallway that smelled faintly of disinfectant and overheated wiring. For 27 years, Denise had been my wife. Now she had scheduled the end of our marriage between dinner and whatever else she thought she was becoming. At 7 that night, I walked into our house and found the dining room staged. Not prepared. Staged. The chandelier was on. The table was cleared except for a folder, a pen, 2 glasses of water, and Denise sitting at the far end in a cream blazer I had never seen before. She looked like she was about to chair a board meeting. "Thank you for being on time," she said. That was the first thing. Not Calvin. Not "we need to talk." Thank you for being on time. I stood in the doorway with grease under one fingernail and a workday still sitting heavy across my shoulders. "What is this?" She gestured at the chair across from her. "Sit down." "I'm fine standing." Her mouth tightened. Walter's estate cleared enough for the first distribution review. There's no point dragging this out. Dragging what out? Our transition. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because the word was so perfectly her. "Our marriage," I said. She looked annoyed, as if I had used a vulgar term in a nice restaurant. "Call it whatever you need to. I'm not carrying you into the next part of my life." There it was. Not anger. Not grief. Not even satisfaction. A clean little sentence designed to make me sound like luggage. I walked to the table and opened the folder. The first page was titled Separation Terms. I read slowly. She watched my face like she expected panic. There was a clause asking me to move into the guest room immediately and vacate the home within 30 days. A clause agreeing that the marital home would be refinanced or sold at her discretion. A clause agreeing that I would not interfere with estate proceeds, estate-backed credit, or property transactions. A clause saying I would communicate with Anna and Sophie only about emotional matters and not financial expectations. A clause saying I acknowledged Denise's inheritance as separate property and waived any challenge related to its use in marital settlement negotiations. I set the paper down. Who wrote this? My advisor reviewed it. Paul? Her eyes shifted. That was enough. Paul is experienced with estate transitions. Paul sells investment products to widows at charity luncheons. Denise's face hardened. You always do that. Do what? Diminish people who operate at a level you don't understand. I looked around the dining room. Our dining room. The table I repaired after Sophie spilled nail polish remover on it at 14. The wall where Anna's graduation photo still hung because I had insisted it stay even when Denise said the frame no longer matched. I understand this, I said. This is not a legal agreement. It's a script you wanted me to perform. For the first time, she lost a little color. Then she recovered. You can make it difficult, or you can be dignified. There it was again. Denise's favorite kind of trap. She would do the damage. Then she would make dignity mean not reacting to it. I picked up my phone and photographed every page. What are you doing? She asked. Keeping records. You don't have my permission. You put documents with my name on them in front of me. I don't need permission. She stood. Calvin, I'm trying to handle this cleanly. No, I said. You're trying to handle this privately. That is the same thing in a family. It used to be. She leaned both hands on the table. I have spent 27 years living beneath what you call practical. The service trucks. The emergency calls. The smell of compressor oil. The same vacations canceled because some hospital freezer alarm mattered more than your wife. You built a company and expected me to be grateful that it paid the bills. I listened. Some of that hurt because some of it was true. I had missed things. I had chosen calls over dinners. I had believed providing was the same as being present more often than I should have. But truth in one corner does not make a whole room honest. Denise continued. Walter understood me. He knew I was meant for more than this. Walter barely tolerated you by the end. Her eyes flashed. That landed. Good. He left me his estate, she said. Then why do you need me to sign anything? Silence. Small. Brief. But real. I looked at the folder again. That's the question, isn't it? She lifted her chin. I need cooperation. Not permission. You're asking for a waiver. I'm asking you not to make this ugly. I almost smiled. Denise, you put our marriage in a PDF called Property Transition. She said nothing. I closed the folder. I'm not signing. You'll regret that. Maybe. I picked up my jacket. Where are you going? To the apartment above the service yard. That surprised her. Good. Mercer Refrigeration had a small apartment over the old office. It was supposed to be for overnight emergency crews during storms. I had stayed there maybe 5 times in 10 years. Denise knew it existed. She did not know it was fully furnished. She did not know I had kept a duplicate set of personal records in the file safe downstairs after one of our technicians lost his house in a fire and told me, always keep copies somewhere your life can't burn at once. Sometimes the habits that save you are not dramatic. They are boring precautions taken years before betrayal needs them. Denise followed me to the hallway. You're really going to make me do this through attorneys? I stopped at the door. You started with paperwork. Then I left. That night, in the apartment above the service yard, I did not sleep. The room was small. Metal desk. Old couch. Microwave. Bed pushed against the wall. Outside, the security lights washed the truck lot in pale blue, and every so often a compressor kicked on in the shop below with a familiar vibration. I sat at the desk and began doing what I should have done months earlier. I reviewed accounts. Not angrily. Systematically. Joint checking. Home equity line. Business distributions. Household reimbursement category. That was where the first pattern appeared. Bright Harbor Services LLC. The name meant nothing to me. The first payment was 6 years old. $1,200. Category, household reimbursement. Then $800. Then $2,400. Then $950. Different descriptions. Vendor refund. Family consulting. Household management. Special maintenance. Always approved through the account Denise managed for household expenses. I opened a spreadsheet and began entering dates. I did not want the total to become what it became. $186,400. Over 6 years. Not stolen in one dramatic sweep. Extracted. Like refrigerant leaking from a line no one checked because the system still seemed to be cooling. I looked up Bright Harbor Services. Registered agent, Denise M. Mercer. Business address, a private mailbox in East Grand Rapids. Formation date, 6 years and 4 months earlier. Purpose, administrative support consulting. I sat back. There it was. A private exit fund wearing the costume of household management. My wife had not become cruel because Walter died. She had been building the door for years. The estate only gave her the confidence to walk through it. At 1:40 in the morning, I found the insurance email. It was from our brokerage firm, copied to Denise, not to me directly. It had been buried under promotional mail because Denise handled household benefits and I had let that be normal. Subject, change request received. The broker wrote, Denise, we received your request to remove Calvin Mercer from administrative access on the family policy due to pending separation. We will need written confirmation from Calvin or formal legal documentation before any change can be processed. Regards, Marlene pending separation. The date was 4 days before the property transition invite. I stared at the screen. She had tried to remove my access before telling me the marriage was over. Not my coverage exactly. Not yet. But access. Control. The ability to see, change, challenge, verify. That was Denise's method. She did not always cut the wire first. Sometimes she just moved the panel where only she could reach it. I saved the email. Then another. A message from Denise to our mortgage broker, asking about a bridge loan using anticipated inheritance liquidity and a likely marital restructuring. Another to a real estate agent asking for estimated refinance values. Another to Paul Raines with the subject, updated transition sequence. The attachment was no longer available in the email thread. But the file name was Post-Estate Transition Plan.xlsx. I looked at that file name until the little black letters felt like a bruise. Then I forwarded everything to Graham Ellis. Graham had been my attorney for business contracts for almost 20 years. He had handled our incorporation, vendor disputes, a building purchase, and once a lawsuit from a grocery chain that believed maintenance contracts were optional until their walk-in freezer died before a holiday weekend. He did not do family law anymore, but he knew everyone who did. At 2:06 a.m., I wrote, Graham, I need a divorce attorney and probably a forensic accountant. Urgent. I attached the term sheet, account screenshots, Bright Harbor registration, insurance email, mortgage emails, and the reference to the transition plan. He replied at 2:19. Do not sign anything. Do not move money except for ordinary living expenses. Stay where there are cameras. Call me at 7:30. That was Graham. No panic. Just instructions. At 7:30, I called. He listened for 20 minutes, interrupting only twice. Once to ask whether Denise had access to business accounts. She did not. Once to ask whether Anna and Sophie knew anything. I said I did not think so. He sighed then. Calvin, in my experience, when someone includes adult children in a financial silence clause, it is because they have already started using them as leverage. That sentence stayed with me. Because by noon, Anna called. Her voice was careful. Too careful. Dad, Mom says you're being difficult about the estate. I was standing in the service yard watching Owen load refrigerant tanks into truck 3. I stepped into my office. What did she tell you? That Walter left her enough money to help with school. She said everything is messy because you're upset and trying to delay things. I closed my eyes. Anna was in a nurse anesthesia program. Tuition, fees, clinical travel, lost work hours. She had debt, and Denise knew exactly where that fear lived. Did she say the help depends on anything? Silence. Anna. She said she needs us to stay neutral. That if you try to make this ugly, money gets tied up, and then she can't help me. There it was. Not a threat. A leash. I kept my voice even. Listen to me. Your education is not supposed to be a weapon between your parents. I know. But she did not sound like she knew. She sounded scared. And because I loved her, I did not unload everything. Not yet. I said, I'm going to tell you more when I have all the facts. For now, do not sign anything for your mother. Do not agree to any loan. Do not give her access to student accounts. Please. Dad, what is happening? The marriage is ending, I said. But I am not leaving you girls. That part is not negotiable. Her breath caught. Okay. After we hung up, I sat in my office and realized Denise had already begun writing the family version. Calvin is emotional. Calvin is delaying. Calvin cannot handle my inheritance. Calvin will adjust. That afternoon, Sophie texted. Dad, did Mom ever talk to you about an education credit line in my name? I stood so fast my chair hit the wall. I called her. She answered immediately. Dad? What credit line? I don't know. I got a credit monitoring alert. It says there was an inquiry 6 months ago for an education line of credit. The contact email was Mom's secondary address. My hand tightened around the phone. Did you authorize anything? No. I thought maybe it was from when she helped with my apartment deposit, but I didn't sign for a loan. Dad, should I be worried? Yes, I said. But not alone. That was the first time my voice shook. Not when Denise handed me the term sheet. Not when I found Bright Harbor. When Sophie asked if she should be worried because her mother might have used her name. I asked her where she was. She said she was sitting in her car in the school parking lot because she did not want to cry in front of her students. I wanted to say 10 things about Denise. I wanted to say I was sorry. I wanted to tell Sophie everything. Instead, I asked the question I should have asked first. Are you safe financially right now? She went quiet. Then she said, I think so. That's not an answer. I have rent due next week. Mom was supposed to help because the school district messed up my stipend reimbursement. But if this is connected to her, I don't want the money. I sat down slowly. Sophie, listen to me. You are not going to lose your apartment because your mother turned money into a test. Send me the amount. I'll help with rent, and then we'll sort out the credit issue with an attorney. Dad, I don't want to be another problem. That sentence hurt worse than the credit alert. You are not a problem, I said. You are my daughter. Problems are things we solve. Daughters are people we protect. She started crying then. Quietly. Trying not to. I stayed on the phone until she could breathe. Then I walked her through freezing her credit. Then I called Graham again. He listened, then said, we are past divorce strategy. This is financial misconduct touching the children. I know. Good. I'm setting you up with Marissa Chen. She is the family law attorney I would hire if my own house were on fire. My house is on fire. No. Your house is under review. That is better. At 9 the next morning, I sat across from Marissa Chen. She was small, sharply dressed, and had a way of looking at documents that made paper seem nervous. Graham sat beside me. I told the story from the calendar invite forward. Marissa did not react much until I showed her the clause forbidding me from discussing finances with Anna and Sophie. Then she made a note. What? I asked. That is not a separation term. That is narrative control. I liked her immediately. We spent 2 hours building a response plan. No confrontation without counsel. No direct financial arguments with Denise. Secure business accounts. Secure personal credit. Notify the insurance broker that no access changes were authorized. Request preservation of records. Identify Bright Harbor transfers. Ask Sophie for the credit inquiry. Ask Anna not to accept estate-linked promises. Most importantly, attend the estate review. That was when I learned Walter had specifically named me as a required participant. Not beneficiary. Participant. Marissa slid the notice across the desk. Walter Keene Estate Review. Required attendees: Denise Mercer, Estate Counsel, Independent Fiduciary, Calvin Mercer, or Counsel. I looked at her. Why me? We'll find out. Denise found out I had retained counsel that same day. Her first text came at 4:12 p.m. You hired lawyers. Of course you did. Then, I tried to be civil. Then, do not poison the girls against me. Then, you are turning this into exactly what I hoped to avoid. I did not reply. At 5:30, Owen knocked on my office door. You okay? That was not a normal question from Owen. He had worked for me 12 years. He did not ask personal things unless flames were visible. I'm handling it. That's not the same. I looked up. He leaned against the doorframe. Got a call from St. Anne's procurement. My stomach tightened. St. Anne's Medical Center was our biggest client. 3 campuses. Pharmacy cooling. Lab refrigeration. Surgical supply storage. Losing that contract would hurt. What did they want? They asked if you were still personally overseeing critical response. Why? Owen's face hardened. Somebody emailed their procurement director and said you were experiencing a personal instability issue that might affect emergency service reliability. For a second, the room narrowed. Who? They didn't say. But the language sounded like someone who uses transition as a noun too much. Denise. Of course. She did not just want the house. She wanted to shake the floor under my work. That was her mistake. My company ran on logs. Dispatch logs. Technician GPS access badges. Service reports. Temperature records. Client sign-offs. You could accuse me of many things, but not being unavailable during critical response. My whole life was built around showing up when systems failed. I called St. Anne's director of facilities, a man named Luis Moreno, who had once told me he trusted my service reports more than his own internal memos. He answered on the first ring. Calvin, I was going to call you. I heard you received an email. He sighed. I did. It was forwarded through procurement. I didn't like it. What did it say? That your divorce was escalating, that you had been removed from your household, that your emotional state may compromise response reliability, and that St. Anne should consider whether Mercer Refrigeration remains an appropriate vendor for critical systems. Removed from my household. She made it sound like a safety action instead of an attempted eviction. Luis, every emergency response for the last 6 months is logged. I can send everything. I know. You know? Calvin, the North Campus pharmacy alarm went off at 2:10 a.m. last month. You answered personally, got a tech on site in 23 minutes, and stayed on the phone with my night supervisor until the temperature stabilized. That is not instability. That is why we use you. I sat down. He continued. I'm not canceling your contract. In fact, I was going to call because we want to discuss expanding coverage to all outpatient clinics next quarter. But I need you to send a formal continuity letter and service log so procurement can close the issue. I'll send them today. And Calvin? Yeah? Whoever wrote that email does not understand what kind of paper trail your business keeps. No, I thought. She really did not. By the end of the day, Graham had sent a preservation notice regarding the email. Owen pulled service logs. I wrote a continuity statement. Luis acknowledged receipt in writing. The next week, Saintons not only kept our contract. They requested a proposal for regional expansion. I did not celebrate. Not then. I simply printed the email, put it in the growing file, and wrote one word across my copy. Backfire. The estate review happened 2 days later. That brings us back to the conference room where Denise stopped smiling. The estate attorney was named Rebecca Hale. She represented Walter's estate, not Denise, a distinction Denise seemed to find personally insulting. The independent fiduciary was a woman named Celeste Warren, all silver hair, reading glasses, and quiet authority. Denise sat beside Paul, though no one had asked Paul to attend. His presence told me more than if she had arrived with an actual lawyer. A lawyer would have told her what could go wrong. Paul had spent months telling her what she wanted to hear. Rebecca opened with the overview. Walter Keene's estate had been informally estimated by family members at several $1 million. That was the first careful sentence. Informally estimated. In reality, the estate consisted of 4 rental properties, 2 with existing mortgages, 1 with major deferred maintenance, an investment account with less liquidity than expected, a small life insurance policy, and several debts related to Walter's final medical care, property taxes, and contractor disputes. Denise's chin lifted. Walter told me the properties alone were worth almost $4 million. Celeste spoke for the first time. Gross appraised value is not available cash. Denise blinked. Rebecca continued. The liquid distribution available within the first year would likely be under $300,000. The rental properties were subject to a 5-year tenant protection clause. Existing tenants could not be evicted without cause, rents could not be raised beyond a defined percentage, and sale of any property required fiduciary review to ensure Walter's housing provisions were honored. Denise's face changed. Not dramatically. But enough. She had not inherited freedom. She had inherited maintenance schedules, tenants, mortgages, taxes, and a woman named Celeste who looked like she could smell nonsense through sealed envelopes. Then came the clause. Rebecca turned a page. Mr. Keene included a spousal protection clause relevant to Mrs. Mercer's current marital circumstances. Denise snapped, "My marriage is not part of my uncle's estate." Celeste looked over her glasses. It became relevant when estate funds were referenced in marital property communications before distribution. Denise's eyes moved to me. There it was. The first crack. Rebecca read the clause. No estate distribution, estate-backed borrowing, or anticipated estate asset may be used to displace a spouse from a marital residence, interfere with lawful access to marital property, remove insurance access, pressure adult children into financial alignment, or accelerate a marital settlement without independent legal review. The room went very quiet. Paul shifted in his chair. Rebecca continued. Any suspected use of estate expectation for coercive marital conduct triggers supervised administration pending review by the independent fiduciary. Denise leaned forward. That language is absurd. Celeste said, "It is specific. My uncle had no right to interfere in my marriage." Rebecca opened another folder. Mr. Keene left a sealed instruction packet explaining his reasoning. Mr. Mercer is named as a permitted recipient. Denise stood. He named him? Yes. He is not blood. No, Celeste said. He is relevant. That might have been the first time anyone in Denise's family had called me relevant in a room where money was being discussed. Rebecca slid the sealed packet toward Graham, who opened it after confirming the seal on record. Inside was a letter addressed to me. Calvin, if you are reading this, Denise has likely tried to turn my estate into a weapon. I hope I am wrong. I have been wrong before. But money does not change a person as much as it reveals the plan they were already carrying. You were steadier to her than she deserved and quieter than was good for you. I do not know everything. I know enough. This estate is not a crown. It is a responsibility. I wrote the restrictions because Denise respects doors only when someone else controls the key. Do not let her convince you that being decent requires being unprotected. Walter, I read it once. Then again. Walter had not been sentimental. Even dying, he wrote like a man tightening bolts. Denise was staring at the letter. You let him talk about me like that? I looked at her. He wrote it before I saw it. You must have poisoned him against me. That almost made me laugh. Denise, until 3 days ago, I thought Walter mostly disliked me because I overcooked steak at your mother's 4th of July. Rebecca cleared her throat. There is more. Of course there was. Walter had included a property memo documenting Denise's repeated statements about finally being able to leave cleanly once his estate settled. He had included notes from a hospice social worker describing Denise's attempt to discuss changing estate provisions while Walter was medicated, which he refused. He had included an instruction that any beneficiary attempting to use estate expectations to manipulate marital residence access or adult children's financial decisions should be placed under supervised distribution. Then Rebecca slid out one last document. This is not part of the will, she said. But it was included in Mr. Keene's file because Mr. Raines submitted estate planning projections to Mrs. Mercer before Mr. Keene's death and again afterward. Paul's face changed. That was the first time he looked truly afraid. Rebecca continued. The projections appear to estimate an early liquidity range of $3.6 to $4.1 million. Those numbers do not account for mortgages, tenant restrictions, deferred maintenance, tax reserves, medical claims, or fiduciary holdbacks. Celeste turned to Paul. Mr. Raines, are these your projections? Paul cleared his throat. They were informal planning scenarios. Were they labeled informal? They were preliminary. Were they labeled preliminary? Paul did not answer quickly enough. Denise turned toward him. You told me those numbers were solid. Paul's voice lowered. I told you they depended on valuation. You told me I could use the expected distribution to restructure my life. I said you should speak with counsel. No, she said. You said counsel slows down momentum. Rebecca looked at Celeste. Celeste made one note. That note seemed to weigh 5 pounds. Paul said, I think I should not participate further without my own counsel. Graham leaned toward me and whispered, that is the smartest thing he has said today. Paul gathered his folder with hands that were not quite steady. As he left the room, Denise watched him in disbelief. Men like Paul do not stay for consequences. They advise fantasies. Then they invoice reality from a safe distance. The next layer came from Sophie. Not in the meeting. That night. She came to the service apartment after work, wearing a cardigan with crayon on the sleeve and a face that made her look 12 and 40 at the same time. I found the spreadsheet, she said. I opened the door wider. What spreadsheet? She held up a flash drive. Post-estate transition plan. I stared at it. How? Mom asked me to help print something from her laptop last month when her printer stopped working. It auto-synced to a shared folder on my old school email. I didn't know until I searched for the credit line documents. She stepped inside. I looked at it, Dad. I did not ask if she was sure. I could see she was not. But she was there anyway. We called Marissa. She told us not to open it further on my laptop, to preserve metadata, and to bring the drive in. The next morning, in Marissa's office, we viewed a copy. There it was. Rows. Columns. Dates. Notes. Calvin exit timing. House refinance. Anna tuition message. Sophie support pause. Insurance access. Broker contact. Paul estate estimate. Public explanation. The public explanation cell said, Calvin overwhelmed by estate shift, Denise seeking peaceful transition. I read that line until I felt nothing. That scared me more than anger. There were tabs. One titled Daughters. Anna, tuition support, emphasized delay risk if Calvin contests. Sophie, apartment deposit, pause future help until aligned. Aligned. That word again. Denise did not want daughters. She wanted votes. Sophie covered her mouth. She planned us, she whispered. Marissa said gently, she planned pressure. Sophie shook her head. No. She put price tags on us. No one corrected her. Because she was right. I turned to Sophie. Did she give you money for the apartment? Sophie nodded. Some. First month and security deposit. I thought it was just Mom helping me get started. Did she ever ask you to sign anything? A reimbursement note. She said it was for her records, not a real loan. Marissa's pen stopped. What did it say? I don't remember exactly. Something about family support advance. Marissa's expression became very still. Sophie, I need you to find that document. Sophie looked ashamed. I signed it. I reached across the table. Look at me. She did. You did not do something wrong by trusting your mother. Her eyes filled. But I feel stupid. That feeling belongs to the person who used your trust. Not to you. She cried then, and I had to sit there in an attorney's office with two lawyers pretending not to watch while I held my daughter's hand and realized Denise had not only made a plan for leaving me. She had made our children instruments inside it. The spreadsheet changed Anna. Not all at once. Anna had been trying to stay neutral, because good daughters are often trained to mistake neutrality for fairness even when one parent is holding the match. But when she saw the tuition tab, something in her hardened. She came to my office 2 evenings later with Sophie. They sat across from me, both holding paper cups of coffee they did not drink. Anna said, Mom told me if I stay out of it, she can help me finish school. I know. If I side with you, she said, everything gets delayed. I know. I asked her if she meant the money came with conditions. What did she say? Anna looked at Sophie, then back at me. She said, every family has conditions. Adults understand that. Sophie's eyes filled. Anna's did not. That was how I knew she was furious. Then Anna said something I will remember as long as I live. If I have to buy my future with silence, it is not help. It is a receipt. I could not speak for a second. She continued. I'm restructuring my loans. My program is hardship options. I should have done it before letting her make me feel like my education depended on being obedient. Sophie put the flash drive on my desk. We're giving this to Marissa. I don't want you in the middle, I said. Anna shook her head. We were already in the middle. She put us there. We're choosing how we stand. That is the thing about watching your children become adults. Sometimes it hurts because they disappoint you. Sometimes it hurts because they become braver than you were ready to need. Denise tried the house next. Not a sale. A refinance. She and Paul had arranged a bridge loan through a private lender using her anticipated estate distribution and projected marital settlement as support. The plan was to extract cash from the house, pay off some of her new obligations, move into a condo, and then force a sale or buyout from a position of strength. At least, that was the spreadsheet version. Reality arrived at a title company conference room with beige walls and a woman named Karen who had clearly decided before the meeting that everyone in it was a problem. Denise invited me by email. Subject, Homestead Clarification. She wrote, this is a routine title matter. Please attend if you intend to be cooperative. Marissa advised me to attend with counsel. Denise did not like that. Paul liked it even less. The escrow officer began with the occupancy affidavit. Karen looked at the file, then at Denise. Mrs. Mercer, your application indicates you are the sole occupying party and sole decision-maker regarding the property. Is Mr. Mercer residing elsewhere permanently? Denise said, we are separated. Karen turned to me. Mr. Mercer? I am temporarily staying in a company apartment because Mrs. Mercer presented a non-filed term sheet and requested that I leave. There is no court order, no signed separation agreement, and no transfer of homestead rights. Karen looked back at the file. Then we cannot proceed without his consent. Denise's mouth tightened. This is my inheritance-backed loan. Karen said, this is a marital residence. Paul finally spoke. The estate proceeds are separate property. Graham, who had joined us for this meeting, said calmly, projected estate proceeds are currently under supervised administration due to a spousal protection clause. They cannot be pledged without fiduciary review. Karen stopped flipping pages. Supervised administration? Graham handed her the notice. Karen read silently. Then she placed the loan packet flat on the table. This closing is suspended. Denise stared. You can't just suspend it. Karen looked at her with the tired patience of someone who absolutely could. We just did. Denise turned on me. You are enjoying this. No, I said. And that was the truth. I was not enjoying it. Enjoyment would have meant I still wanted to be close enough to her pain to measure it. I was protecting myself. Those are not the same. This was supposed to be simple, she said. It was never simple. You just planned it around me not reading anything. Karen gathered the file. I will need updated documentation from the fiduciary before any further review. Denise stood so quickly her chair scraped the floor. Paul stood too, but slower. Outside in the parking lot, I saw them argue beside her car. I could not hear every word. I did not need to. His hands were raised. Hers were sharp. Then he walked away first. That was the beginning of Paul leaving her. It was also the beginning of Paul getting careful. 3 days later, Graham forwarded an email Paul had sent to Denise after the estate meeting. Denise, per our conversation, all prior projections were illustrative and not intended as legal, tax, or estate advice. You were advised to consult independent counsel before making major financial decisions. Paul the First stared at it. There are sentences people write not because they are true, but because they are afraid another sentence is coming. Denise replied, you told me liquidity would not be an issue. Paul wrote back, you are mischaracterizing our discussions. Denise replied, I signed the condo lease because you said timing mattered. Paul replied, I did not advise you to sign any lease. He was cutting the rope while pretending there had never been a bridge. Those emails mattered later. Not because they made Paul the villain of the story. He was not important enough for that. But they showed something Denise did not want to face. Her fantasy had required collaborators. And the moment the fantasy became expensive, every collaborator began saving himself. The next 2 months were not dramatic in the way people expect. They were paperwork dramatic. Which is worse, if you know how paperwork works. Denise's estate distribution was restricted pending review. Bright Harbor was subpoenaed. The insurance broker produced the change request. The mortgage broker produced her emails. The title company produced the suspended refinance file. St. Anne's Procurement produced the reputation email. Sophie froze her credit and filed a dispute over the inquiry. Anna submitted a statement that Denise had tied tuition assistance to staying neutral. Denise's attorney tried to frame everything as emotional misunderstanding during a stressful estate period. Marissa replied with a timeline. Timelines are ruthless. They do not care what you meant. They care what happened first. Bright Harbor formed 6 years earlier. Money moved. Walter declined Denise's medication-era document request. Paul sent inflated projections. Denise contacted the mortgage broker. Denise contacted the insurance broker. Denise sent property transition invite. Denise sent reputation email. Denise attempted refinance. Denise referenced daughter's support as alignment pressure. That was not stress. That was sequence. At one point, Denise left me a voicemail. Marissa told me I did not have to listen. I did anyway. Her voice was tired. Not soft. Tired. Calvin, you're making me look like a monster. I paused the recording. Sat with that. Then played the rest. You know I gave years to this marriage too. You know I was lonely. You know you were always at work. You know I had dreams before I became Mrs. Mercer Refrigeration. But now everyone thinks I'm some greedy villain because you keep saving every scrap of paper like you're building a case against your own wife. I saved the voicemail. Not for court. For myself. Because even then, she still thought the problem was how she looked. Not what she did. The settlement conference happened in January. Snow was piled along the sidewalks outside Marissa's office, dirty from traffic. Denise arrived with her attorney but without Paul. That said enough. The estate numbers were final by then. Denise had expected freedom measured in millions. She received restricted assets, supervised distributions, tenant obligations, property maintenance issues, tax liabilities, and roughly $287,000 in accessible liquidity after debts and administrative reserves. That is still a lot of money. Enough to change a careful person's life. Not enough to fund the fantasy she had already started spending. She had signed a luxury condo lease downtown. She had borrowed against expected distributions. She owed a private lender Paul had introduced her to. She had promised Anna tuition help and Sophie future support. She had treated anticipated money like cash in hand. Now most of it had conditions. Her inheritance had not vanished. It had become what she hated most. Responsibility. Paul's role did not disappear either. Celeste filed a summary with the estate record noting that Paul's preliminary projections had been used by Denise to seek estate-backed credit before distribution approval. The charity board quietly removed him from its legacy giving committee. His firm sent a letter full of phrases like internal review and client communication standards. He did not lose everything. Men like Paul rarely do. But he lost the room where he had looked most impressive. For him, that may have been enough. The divorce settlement reflected everything. I kept the house, with a structured equity offset. Mercer Refrigeration remained mine. Bright Harbor funds were accounted for, with a portion credited back through property division. Denise assumed her personal debts and estate-related obligations. She received her inheritance subject to the estate restrictions. We agreed on no disparagement, but with exceptions for truthful legal, financial, and credit reporting disclosures. That exception mattered. Denise wanted silence. I agreed to accuracy. Those are very different things. At the end of the conference, Denise asked to speak to me alone. Marissa said no. Graham said absolutely not. I said, she can speak here. So Denise stood at the conference table, coat over her arm, looking smaller than she had in the estate room but not softer. I did not think it would go this way, she said. I almost answered too quickly. Then stopped. That sentence deserved the right response. No, I said. You thought I would adjust. Her face tightened. I was unhappy. I know. You were gone all the time. I know. I felt like a supporting character in your life. That one landed. Because there was truth in it. I had failed her in ways I would have to live with. But failure is not a blank check. I should have been more present, I said. Her eyes flickered. Hope, maybe. Or opportunity. Then I finished. But absence is not consent to be used. The hope disappeared. Good. She looked down. I don't know who I am now. I believe that. For years, she had built an identity around the future version of herself who would leave, upgrade, control the story, and be applauded for finally choosing herself. Now that woman did not exist. All that remained was Denise, with files. I hope you figure it out, I said. Do you hate me? I thought about it. The term sheet. Bright Harbor. Anna's tuition tab. Sophie's credit inquiry. The email to St. Anne's. Walter's letter. Paul's projections. The refinance table. I thought about 27 years of dinners and road trips and holding newborn babies in hospital rooms. I thought about the times she did love me, or something close enough that I could not call the whole marriage fake without lying to myself. No, I said. She looked up. That doesn't mean what you want it to mean. She looked away. I know. Maybe she did. Maybe for the first time. The regional contract from St. Anne's came through 2 weeks after the divorce agreement was signed. 3 years. All outpatient clinics. Critical storage systems. Emergency response retainer. Enough revenue to hire 2 new technicians and replace the oldest truck in our fleet. Owen read the award email over my shoulder and said, "So your wife tried to get us fired and accidentally got us promoted." I looked at him. That is not the wording we will use in the staff meeting. But it's the accurate one. Accuracy can still have manners. Barely. I laughed. For the first time in months, it did not feel like something breaking loose from pain. It just felt like laughter. Anna restructured her loans. It was not easy. It was not clean. But it was hers. Sophie got the credit inquiry removed after a long fight that made her more cynical about paperwork than any teacher should have to be at 23. They still struggled with Denise. Of course they did. She was their mother. Love does not disappear because evidence arrives. But something had shifted. They no longer treated money as proof of love. They no longer let gifts arrive without reading the tag. In March, Anna came by the service yard with sandwiches. She found me in the back office reviewing payroll. "You need curtains in here," she said. "I have blinds. You have dust with strings. Good to see you too." She smiled and sat across from me. Then she said, "Mom asked if I would meet her for lunch." I waited. I said yes. "How do you feel about that?" "Nervous." "Do you want advice?" "No good." She laughed. Then her face softened. "I'm not cutting her out, Dad. I didn't ask you to." "I know. That's why I'm telling you." That hit me harder than I expected. Because for months, Denise had told them choosing truth meant choosing sides. But Anna was learning something better. Boundaries are not always walls. Sometimes they are doors with working locks. Sophie visited the next day after school. She brought a stack of drawings her students had made for Community Helper Week after she told them her dad fixed big refrigerators in hospitals. One child had drawn me as a superhero holding a wrench larger than my body. Owen taped it to the office wall. "I finally get the recognition I deserve," he said. "It's not you. It could be. My beard is heroic." Sophie rolled her eyes, then leaned against my desk. "I'm glad you didn't leave Michigan." I looked at her. "Did you think I would?" "I thought maybe you'd want to start over somewhere else." I thought about it. And? I looked through the office window at the service trucks lined up outside. This is mine. Not the building. Not even the company. The life. The people who counted on me before everything went bad and still count on me now. Sophie nodded. "Mom thought leaving meant winning." "I know. What do you think winning is?" I did not answer right away. Then I said, "Not becoming someone you would be ashamed to recognize." She came around the desk and hugged me. I held on longer than usual. So did she. The name change happened in April. Not mine. The company's. Mercer Refrigeration had been accurate for 23 years, but the St. Anne's contract pushed us into a different category. We were no longer just fixing grocery freezers and walk-ins. We were managing critical systems. Hospital cooling. Pharmacy storage. Lab refrigeration. Emergency response. Owen joked that we needed a name that sounded like we owned at least one clipboard with authority. So we became Mercer Critical Systems. Anna and Sophie insisted on being there when the new sign went up. It was a cold Saturday morning, bright and windy, the kind of Michigan spring day that makes you question whether spring has actually read the schedule. Owen rented a lift. One of our techs brought coffee. Sophie took too many pictures. Anna cried and pretended the wind made her eyes water. When the old sign came down, I felt something I had not expected. Not sadness. Respect. Mercer Refrigeration had carried me through marriage, fatherhood, payroll scares, broken trucks, late invoices, night calls, and years when I thought being useful was the same as being safe. The new sign did not erase that. It marked the part where I understood usefulness was not all I was. That evening, the alarm came from St. Anne's North Campus. Pharmacy cold storage. Temperature rising. Backup unit failed to cycle. Owen was closer, but I went too. Some habits remain because they are good habits. We arrived at 11:40 p.m. The night supervisor looked terrified. A refrigerator full of medication does not care about divorce, estate law, or emotional growth. It cares whether the temperature stays where it must. We found the issue in 17 minutes. A control board failure creating a bad signal to the backup compressor. Owen bypassed the failed control safely while I coordinated with the pharmacy director and documented the temporary fix. At 1:12 a.m., the temperature stabilized. At 1:40, the alarm cleared. The pharmacy director, a woman named Dr. Patel, stood in the hallway with both hands around a paper cup of coffee and said, "You saved us tonight." I wanted to deflect. Old instinct. Make it smaller. Say it was nothing. Instead, I said, "That's what we're here for." Outside, cold air hit my face. Owen loaded tools into the truck. "You good, boss?" I looked back at the hospital, lights glowing against the dark. Systems fail. Systems recover. But only if someone stops ignoring the alarms. "Yeah," I said. "I'm good." A year after the estate hearing, I received a letter from Walter's estate office. The administrative period had entered its final stage. Denise remained the primary beneficiary, still subject to the tenant clauses and property oversight. The first annual fiduciary report included rental income, maintenance obligations, taxes, reserves, and a list of repairs Denise was required to authorize before any additional distribution. I read it once, then put it away. There was a time I would have wanted to know whether she was suffering. Whether Paul left. Whether the condo lease hurt. Whether the money disappointed her. I knew some of it through unavoidable channels. Paul did leave. The condo did become too expensive. The rental properties did become a burden. Denise did not become poor. She became accountable. For her, that may have been worse. Anna and Sophie still saw her sometimes. Less often at first. Then more steadily once Denise learned that every lunch did not need to include a financial offer, a complaint about me, or a revision of history. Progress can be ugly. It can also be real. I did not ask them to report back. They did not offer. That was healthier for all of us. On the anniversary of the property transition invite, I found myself standing in the dining room of the house Denise had tried to leverage away from me. The table was still there. Same wood. Same faint mark from Sophie's nail polish remover. Same place where the term sheet had sat. But the room felt different. Not because the house had changed. Because I no longer believed staying calm meant letting someone else control the minutes. Sophie had left a stack of student drawings on the sideboard. Anna had dropped off a container of soup because she said I eat like a divorced raccoon when unsupervised. Owen had texted me a picture of the new truck with the caption, "Behold, the emotional support van." Life had become smaller in some ways. Quieter. Less polished. More honest. I thought about Walter's line. Money does not change a person as much as it reveals the plan they were already carrying. He was right. Denise had carried a plan. 4 years. Maybe I had too. Mine was not as cruel, but it was there. The plan to keep working. Keep providing. Keep assuming loyalty would be obvious because I had earned it quietly. Keep ignoring alarms because the room still felt cold. I do not do that now. I read the logs. In business. In family. In myself. That does not make me suspicious. It makes me awake. Sometimes people ask if I think Denise lost. I do not answer that the way they expect. She inherited the estate. She got the properties, the title, the reports, the obligations, the repairs, the tenants, the taxes, the supervised distributions, the money that remained after the fantasy burned off. She got what Walter left her. Just not in the form she imagined. I kept my company. I kept my house. I kept my daughters. More importantly, I kept the part of me that would have been easiest to destroy. My decency. Not the soft version. Not the version that signs bad papers to avoid conflict. The harder version. The one with boundaries. The one that documents. The one that says no without becoming cruel. On a Sunday evening in late spring, Anna and Sophie came over for dinner. Nothing fancy. Burned garlic bread. Pasta. Salad no one cared about. Sophie graded spelling tests at the table while Anna told a story about a clinical instructor who apparently hated joy. For a while, I just listened. My daughters were arguing about sauce. The house was warm. My phone was face down. No alarms. No calendar invites. No attachments waiting to rename my life. Anna noticed me watching and said, "Dad, why are you smiling like that?" I shook my head. No reason. Sophie pointed a fork at me. That means emotional reason. Eat your pasta. They laughed. And in that ordinary sound, I felt the final piece settle. Not victory. Not revenge. Something better. Return. Denise thought inheritance would give her a new life. Maybe it did. But not the one she planned. As for me, I did not inherit Walter's money. I inherited his warning. I inherited the documents she never expected me to read. I inherited the courage to stop adjusting. She inherited the money. I inherited my life back.